September 19th, 1976. It's week 2 of the NFL season, and the Denver Broncos are taking the New York Jets to the cleaners. In one of the biggest beatdowns in the history of the franchise, the Broncos have just decided to rip the heart and soul out of the New York Jets by defeating them 46-3 in a game that was complete and utter domination. It was a game where the Broncos outgained the Jets 543 to 185 in total yardage, basically tripling their output there. It was a game where the Broncos had roughly triple the first downs that the Jets had, winning that battle 31-11. It was a game where the Broncos scored the final 40 points of the contest, and was a game that set the tone for how the 1976 season was going to go for the Broncos, as even though they wouldn't make it to the playoffs, they would finish as one of the best teams in football, boasting an offense and a defense that was inside the top quarter of the league, and finishing with a franchise-best 9-5 record. This game was also notable because after the game, Lou Holtz, the coach of the Jets, famously said that he had no issue with how the game went, and didn't think that head coach John Ralston was running up the score. Ralston was apologetic to Holtz about how the game went, and said that he didn't want his team winning by that many points, and said that he didn't intend to embarrass the Jets. And Holtz said that he had nothing to apologize for, because this is professional football, and if you don't like it, stop it. And his Jets didn't do a good enough job of stopping the Broncos. You can learn more about that game and that moment by clicking the card in the upper right corner, because I talked about that a while ago on this channel. What transpired at that game right here is the classy way to respond to getting blown out and to getting run up on, if that's even a thing, because again, this is professional football that we're talking about here. I'm not even sure that would apply in that game, seeing as the Broncos scored one offensive touchdown during the entire second half, and it came with the backups in. Lou Holtz's response during this game was classy and dignified. Because on the complete opposite end of the spectrum from this game, you've got what John McKay did later in the season after a game with his Tampa Bay Buccaneers squad against the Broncos. Somehow, there are not one, but two stories about the Broncos quote-unquote running up the score on their opponents during the 1976 season. And even though, in theory, both times should be similar, oh, that could not be further from the truth. Because this one produced a wildly different result. Whereas Lou Holtz said, "It's not your fault. You guys played your butts off. Don't worry about it. We need to do a better job on our end." John McKay had a very level-headed response and wanted everyone on the Broncos to die. And we're going to break it down today. Because half a century later, this is the story behind one of the worst moments of John McKay's career, and his reaction to the Broncos running up the score on his squad, if you even want to call it that. Make sure you hit that like button down below, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a single video that we post on the channel. We post every single day on here about the weird and the wacky history of the NFL, and I would really appreciate your support as we try and grow this community even more. So thanks in advance, and with that in mind, let's talk about the game that really put the crush in the Orange Crush. Before I talk about the actual incident in question, we need some context to understand the main team in our story, as in, the team that, to the surprise of no one, is about to get clobbered. The 1976 Tampa Bay Buccaneers are probably the worst team in NFL history, and I only say probably on that if we're counting some of the teams during World War II and the teams in the 1920s that played a handful of games before folding. In terms of the teams post-merger, without a doubt, it's the Buccaneers and everyone else. This was Tampa Bay's first season in the NFL, and while no one expected the expansion team to be any good right off the bat, I don't think anyone expected this, where they literally went the entire season without winning a game. They never scored more than 20 points in a contest. They got shut out 5 times. Only 3 times did they even play a team within one possession, as not only were they losing games, but they were losing games really badly. The Bucs scored just 125 points all season, averaging under 9 points per game. Unsurprisingly, this was the worst total in the league. They allowed 412 points, allowing over 29 points per game, which was the second worst total in the league. This meant that, on average, they were losing games by 21 points, or 3 touchdowns. Their point differential of -287 was the worst point differential at the time in NFL history, and it still is to this day. To give you an idea of how bad that is, When the Cleveland Browns went winless in 2017, their point differential was minus 176, and that was in a 16-game season. So the Buccaneers were somehow 111 points worse than a team that finished 0-16. I could go on and on about the ineptitude of the Tampa Bay franchise and just how bad they were, but you get the idea. This wasn't just a bad football team. This was a historically bad team that lives on to this day as one of the worst teams in the history of American sports. I also bring this up because you would think they'd be used to losing and they would know how to handle it, but apparently not, based on what we're about to see transpire. Because now, we go to week 9 of the NFL season, as the Buccaneers are traveling to Mile High to take on the Denver Broncos in this game right here, in what is, oddly enough, a divisional matchup. Seriously, the Buccaneers were in the AFC West during their first season. The Broncos are sitting at 500, needing to win this game to stay alive in the wildcard hunt, seeing as the Oakland Raiders are running away with the division and have been for quite some time. But let's be honest, no one, not a single soul, not even John McKay's closest relative, is expecting Tampa to win this game. Denver enters this game as 17.5-point favorites, and this should be a free win for the Broncos on their home field against this historically inept team. And sure enough, it was, as the Broncos won the game convincingly, taking it by a final score of 48-13, beating the Buccaneers by 35 points. The Orange Crush defense forced 4 turnovers, as Denver doubled Tampa's total yardage, outgaining them 415-234 in that category. The Broncos gave quarterbacks Steve Spurrier and Parnell Dickinson fits, as combined, the Bucs quarterbacks went just 16 for 37, completing 43% of their passes for 131 yards, no touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and a combined passer rating of 30.3, which is worse if you did nothing but spike the ball into the ground on every single play. Running back Otis Armstrong had 116 yards on the ground for the Broncos, with the Pro Bowl running back and the league leader in rushing yards in 1974 absolutely dominating today. And what's crazy is that even though it looked for a brief moment like the Buccaneers had a shot, as they were actually up 13-10 at one point early in the third, from the middle of the third quarter to the start of the fourth, the Broncos scored 38 points in 8 minutes. Seriously, 38 points in 8 minutes. How is that possible? Well, the Broncos had not 1, not 2, but 3 defensive touchdowns in that stretch, including 2 pick sixes and a fumble return. We've seen some crazy stretches in NFL history before, but not too many teams can say that they scored 38 in 8 minutes. Yep, that's what the Broncos did, as they got above 500 and gave the Bucs their 9th loss of the season. And after the game, Bucs head coach John McKay was furious. After this game where the Bucs lost by 35 points, he was hopping mad. Not at the referees or his players, but at the Broncos for beating his team by too much. Because he accused the Broncos of running up the score. Part of this stemmed from a rivalry between McKay and Bronco head coach John Ralston, seeing as prior to coaching in the NFL, McKay was at USC and Ralston was at Stanford. So the two coaches were leading very successful rival schools that played in the same conference. Remember when college conferences actually made sense geographically? Yeah, me neither. That bad blood boiled over here after this 35-point drubbing, because after McKay refused to shake hands with Ralston, he lashed out at the Broncos for scoring too many points, saying on Bronco offensive coordinator Max Coley, the guy who calls the plays, I hope he got his offensive stats up today, and I hope he gets fired tomorrow. He knew we were hurting. Spoiler alert, Coley was not fired the next day, as I don't know any team that's going to fire their offensive coordinator mid-season after a 35-point win. McKay added, I think you have to think about the guy on the other side of the field who is miserable, saying that coaches should take the feelings of other coaches into consideration and shouldn't blow teams out that way. And understandably, after this game, the Broncos were absolutely confused about this for a few reasons. Number one, it's professional football. I'm not even sure there's such a thing as running up the score, especially when point differential was pretty high up in the tiebreakers. Today, the first instance of point differential being used in any capacity is the 9th tiebreaker, which we've never gotten to. But in 1977, it was only the 4th tiebreaker. So there was a chance, depending on how the standings played out, that how much you won games by could come into play. Number 2, how is it possible to run up the score when 3 defensive touchdowns are scored? It's not like the Broncos were calling bombs and passing plays and deep shots and whatnot. The Broncos got 21 points because you turned it over. It's like blaming a basketball team for running up the score when you keep fouling them and sending them to the free throw line. What are they supposed to do? Just miss the free throws? I don't know how that works. So not only were the Broncos not running up the score, but I'm not sure John McKay has any concept of what running up the score is. Plus, if what the Broncos did was running up the score, because you have to think about the other coach's feelings, what would you call it when a team beats another team 54-7, as USC did against Washington State in 1974? What would you call it when a team beats another team 51-6, as USC did multiple times throughout the 1972 season? What about dropping 70 points on Washington State in a 70-33 game in 1970? Or beating Iowa 48-0 that same season? Or beating Wyoming 56-6 in 1965? These are all scores that McKay's USC team that he coached won games by. And apparently, there's nothing wrong with that. But when a pro team beats his squad by 35 points because his team can't hold onto the football, we're crying foul. The hypocrisy on this is astounding. So yeah, the Broncos took exception to this, with Bronco offensive coordinator Max Coley responding the only way he knew how, with complete and utter confusion and mockery of the situation. As Coley said, "I don't know who he wanted us to run our offense against, if not his defensive line. His coaching staff? I think he must have lost his poise. Evidently, he doesn't know the difference between offense and defense and who was doing the scoring. However, he must be an expert because he's beaten a lot of college teams." That's the first time I've ever seen a coach blame the other coaching staff for a loss. Yeah, I think that just about sums it up. Blaming the other team for winning by too many points, especially at the professional level, and especially when the Broncos put in the backups and were run heavy throughout the fourth quarter, playing backup Norris Weiss at quarterback, and giving players a chance to touch the ball that normally don't, is something that you don't see every day. But that's the route that John McKay decided to take for some reason. If the Buccaneers didn't like losing, that's too bad, because there was going to be a lot more losing before there was any winning. The Buccaneers not only lost their final 5 games of the season after that Bronco drubbing, but they lost their first 12 games of the ensuing season, one of which you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner. And they wouldn't pick up a win until week 13 of the 1977 season, following an 0-26 start in franchise history. And look, John McKay had said some really crazy and funny things before. He's got what might be the greatest personality of any NFL coach ever, and his mouth was a goldmine for content. But man, I don't know what he was thinking here. I just don't. To blame a team for scoring too many points, especially when those points came on defense, just seems like a man who lost his marbles, especially at the professional level. Because in 1976, after the Broncos scored too many points on his team, it left John McKay to say, "What the buck?" Be sure to like and subscribe if you have not done so already, as it helps the channel out a lot. And check out my other channels, JG8 for the history of college football, JG7 for the history of baseball, and JG9 News, where we talk about all things happening in the NFL. Join me every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, where we'll play live NFL trivia for cash prizes. And make sure to join me live, as we're on stream just about every single day. And thanks to all our Patreon members and our YouTube members for helping out the channel. See how you become a member and show your support financially in the description down below.